the students are doing here is a collaborative drawing exercise, and we're looking at who and what makes decisions when you're drawing and when you're in the co-production of knowledge. So hopefully this exercise speaks to the fact that the two people are making decisions within the drawing process, but also the ink itself is kind of guiding what happens. So hopefully by the end of this exercise, students will have some knowledge about the impact of materials and decision making and holding knowledge and experiences.
You know.
Nice little satisfying motion we've got going there.
And this time you're going to do the same exercise, but you're going to have a conversation beforehand about your intentions. Who or what is making decisions and collaborating?
So we've got the two people.
Yeah.
We've got the ink.
Yeah.
We've got the wind.
Yeah.
We've had probably a bit of rain as well.
Yeah.
The paper, in a way, because it showed us the limitations. So these were the collaborators.
Exactly. So
when
Equal terms. On equal terms.
well, that was important because it's changed from I don't want to qualify it better or easier or whatever, but it's just I think there was more attention to the ink in the first situation because it was doing that and the wind way and on the second one we tried to plan and we tried to do something with the material, so that was also interesting. But we obviously had an idea of what we could do with the material. If it worked or not doesn't really matter, but I think these were two different types of collaborations in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So no matter where you do this exercise, there's definitely two people and the ink are really active collaborators. So the material is a collaborator. So if you do it without talking, you give space for the ink to be more equally part of that conversation. Once you start to talk beforehand, because the ink can't speak, you're effectively cutting it out of the conversation. But of course you're not, because then you have some knowledge of the ink from the one before. But all I would say is when you're in the co-production of knowledge, you need to look at who and what is affecting or having an impact on what's happening. And then you can start to think, well, how best to listen to all of it.
I was going to say, so if you think about it like that, we were talking over the ink in the first exercise and we weren't in the second.
Yeah.
Kind of like that. Because we basically did a version of the first in the second, because we did the bit that we liked again and had more fun with it without speaking.
Yeah.
Because we were just kind of enjoying the ink casting around as much as us.
So that's perfectly valid, and that's kind of testing it out, doing it again. The ink did this. That is listening, but across the two, isn't it? Yeah.
I was just thinking that when you talked about it, the ink can't talk. But it was once we'd decided what we wanted to do that I felt more aware of the ink as asserting itself.
Yes.
Even because we said we weren't going to let it go over the edge.
Yeah.
Straight away it went over the edge.
Yeah.
And so it's...
that's why it's a good one, because the ink is quite a force in its own right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And only
you're
when
right.
you decide what you want to do with it do you become aware of how much it does what it wants.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the points of that. You try and work it out, but it will kind of you can control it a bit, can't you? But not totally.
I also notice sometimes, when you don't know someone and you're coming together to do something for the first time, one of the strategies you might use to cope in that situation is kind of humour and laughter. But that humour and laughter can kind of subvert an attentiveness to other things that are going on. So it might be just another thing you reflect on in your own, if you have kind of research inquiries that involve interaction in any form, what humour and laughter does to a situation, and what happens when you sort of take it away. So today we're getting our students to go for a walk and in pairs talk about co-production in their thesis and where the co in co-production is located when they're conducting their doctoral study. So this includes thinking about an expanded sense of co-production, not just with people, but with the environment, with the archive, with the landscape they're passing through, and how that gives rise to different forms of knowledge. We're then asking them to symbolise that through using the materials around them. So a bit of a doctoral adventure.
I was saying how the ocean is like my PhD at the moment, and my thoughts and what I'm writing is like water drops in this huge ocean.
And the perspective is lost and you feel overwhelmed and you can't see specifics, you're just surrounded. So this is what I thought, that the cliff keeps retreating and I'm the cliff, and the sea is the PhD and it's eroding my position away with time. It's a little bit dark, I understand that, but that's how I felt today, quite exposed, quite cold, quite, I was just like sort of meandering, but then I was getting it. It was a slow and, unpredictable process, so that's what I thought. And then we just wrote it here, didn't we?
Yes.
I don't understand.
I would say maybe like if everyone wanted to take turns sitting here, it's a really nice place to sit and have a conversation. The water was higher, but I was told that I should not go down the stairs, so instead I drew my feet kind of in anticipation of wanting to go down the stairs. But thinking about the ocean again in terms of this like metaphor of it as ideas, but I was thinking about being in the water and how that gives you proximity to like the rest of the water and to all of the stuff. So like even if the thing is just the part that's actually touching you, you actually are then next to all of the other things that you don't, you can't hold yet. You can't hold any of the water, so that's fine. But kind of the idea of being in it, and so knowing a little bit of something very massive and then knowing all of it by, proximity maybe? We're talking about the sound into the ocean. For me, I'd been thinking about sounds a lot like a crowd, like that kind of like the dull, quiet roar of the crowd of people as they cheer, which is nice, that kind of, there's someone watching your performance, maybe.
It was about my ideas of the performance of a place can be found in the performances in place, and it was about the residents of Letchworth performing place in the early days and how I was co-producing with their memories in the archive, like memories that they would never think be valuable to any researcher, personal collections, and how I've made a story out of that. And that's just the stage in Utopia, but there's no... We were hoping it would get washed away a bit.
Yeah, the poetics of making a stage for Utopia and then letting it disappear.
Yeah.
That was, appealed to my sense of poetry.
The point of that slope is that things always fall down it, so that it's like co-production, working with people is like ping pong. So you don't quite know how somebody's going to pong something back to you or ping something back to you. So the idea of something being in flux and just going like a wave against, it's kind of like that. And I related it to email conversations I was having, where one guy writes to me when he wants to say something really big, he always uses capitals, and when he wants to whisper or be indiscreet, he puts things in brackets. And both of those are things that change, and the whole thing is like in an email. And what you were thinking is,
it's kind of that feeling when you have a slanted surface and you say, okay, I'm going to put this there, and it keeps sliding down. And it was a bit like that with my participants. You try and lead workshops, or you try and lead focus groups in a particular way, but you can plan as much as you want, but they are going to say and do what they want to do because it just flows that way. So you can intend for things to go a certain way, but sometimes it's just best to let it fall and then maybe crash and break open and see what comes out of that and be okay with that. So I'm okay with not having done anything to it now.
Good job, because it can't bloody
I've
reach.
changed my mind about it, how I feel about it. So that's
Freshest thinking.
yeah.
Oh.
I found it really difficult to find an object, so I have none. So my thoughts are not as manifested yet. They're still very fluid, and I noticed that. But also that finding a project, it's actually, I put a lot of pressure on me just finding something, and that's my PhD. So I put a lot of pressure on me of doing things really like when I have the time, and because there's so much going on. And so I thought that was really interesting to experience that in nature, where I can't freaking find a plant that represents what we're supposed to do, or I can't draw, and it's not that I'm not capable of doing it, but just that reflection is really good.
And I think sometimes that fears of pressure, when you pressurise yourself, and things become difficult and a bit afraid, all those kind of negative feelings can sometimes be really anti-creative and anti-productive. That's why sometimes just doing something just helps trigger and helps you find a way forward. And I think that's something probably most PhD students feel, is that kind of pressure. You look at where that's coming from, and can something about the practice or the materials alleviate that from you for some of the time. Obviously you need the pressure of the final deadline, and sometimes that at points in your study the pressure will be useful, but not for 3 years. That's just going to kill you. So working out how to alleviate yourself from pressure through materials can be really helpful.
Now the students have been asked to collect water from the sea, and each of them is going to pour water on 3 different surfaces. And that experiment is sort of a metaphor for how their doctoral thesis involves this form of systematic inquiry and exploration, but that also they can't necessarily control exactly what will come out of their systematic inquiry. So it performs a sort of metaphor, but also there's a whole body of theory called vital materialism, where we think about the materiality of objects and how they affect how we think and what we do, and we're just sort of introducing them to that body of theory and thinking by asking them, what scripts does water write, and how does this process of pouring water on 3 different surfaces make water itself legible as something that animates our own thought and that can be thought about in itself.
Harry, you've done it. The bone.
It's like a tube.
How can we make water legible? Well, I said by having it always on something that's clear for you, it can be legible.
Yeah. So it's always water in conjunction with, in order for it to have any legibility. And I know this, we're not talking about your particular doctoral topic here, but it's the same with your doctoral topic, isn't it? It's always the topic in conjunction with, in order to make it legible, and therefore it transforms it in some way.
Into something.
That surface.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I feel from pouring water in different surfaces. It's just if you can feel the different, you can see different forms by just pouring different objects.
So the different surfaces, just the same as when you're doing your doctoral thesis and you're trying to apprehend a topic, how you apprehend it, through what means you make it manifest and legible, is going to affect the flow and what you see come about. In abstract terms.
I was thinking about power observation and influence. Like sometimes I was watching what the water was doing, and sometimes I was trying to change its path. And how, yes, I'm sure research is like that as well, that when you've got a question in mind, it's very easy to slip into shaping things, but maybe it's okay to, but just be aware of it.
I guess I was thinking about that question of legibility and not diluting, but kind of using the water. I was taking it in precision with something like water, how like it kind of becomes this massive thing, and then you can actually use it in quite precise ways. And I was dipping stones in it, and then the stones are wet, and then all the other stones were dry, and that kind of turning that. I suppose that's just making it legible in different ways, or using this massive thing in some way that kind of feels like it's contrary to the other maybe narrative that's happening, kind of with all of the water, and kind of just having like a very small amount of the water, but in very close proximity, felt interesting. Maybe.
Yeah, really, I love the way some people are talking about it as metaphor and others are keeping their response in the practice itself, which and both, can resonate in different ways and have meaning.
I am water, 97%. So water is me, so I think that's really important to be aware of, that I'm not different from it, but we have a different shape. And I've got a couple more shapes. So this is scripted by water, and this is scripted by humans. What's the difference?
Nice. Like what you found.
I'm glad you came to use. I may
Thank
say
and actually,
that one of them.
That's my gift. She's my collaborator on this one. I'm so touched.
And on that, one of the things that I learnt and left a little mark about was to trust that the environment has what you need. Because I knew there was chalk here, and I've been drawing with that chalk here for years, but still I went and bought people chalks. I thought you might not like the natural chalk. But I did have trusted myself that, the environment has got what we need. Yeah. So that's great.
I would have never used this to draw. Look how beautiful this is.
And some people have already started to work in the way that we're going to ask next, and that's this kind of very creative, drawn and sculptural and curated response to things. In addition to writing and drawing, I'm going to ask you to make a little thing similar to that in a place in here, so we're not doing any more cold things. So go and rummage for things that you think can hold some of this, and then come back in here and find a little place to make a little sculpture, a little tableau, a little something that speaks of 3 different emotions around your doctoral study. There is an alternative to talking about your feelings if you feel like you've got that under control and you don't need to. You could think about 3 different aspects of your doctoral study and how they fit together. So you might want to just go, that's how I feel, or you might want to say, these are the aspects, you might want to tell us more. Can I start? Yeah, great, thanks.
So this is my PhD. I started with this huge ambition, this huge heavy idea, and then suddenly out of that, all of this complexity, ideas, different aspects came out, and I feel like a mess. I'm hoping that I would get this final PhD out of all of this.
3 aspects of my PhD: lots of paper, lots of paper, a bit of me, not all of me, a bit of me, and some rubbish that I like. And I like the fact that there's shit in there, that there's crap in there, and that there's rubbish in there, because there needs to be.
This is my thoughts about my PhD. Is like 3 steps. The first, these are the different disciplines I'm looking at. So they're different shape and colors of things I'm looking at. And I was thinking the way of going to my PhD is really flat surface, clear, but it's like this. Is I have no idea where I am in that shell. I'm completely lost. But if I succeed and I get out of this shell, I'm sure my PhD is inside here, which is something really simple, but it's massive.
Maybe I'll explain. So I picked the rock on the top because it felt very nice in my hand and it had edges, so that it has it's the thing being in hand, but it's kind of precariously balanced on all the other stuff. And then the shell, we found the shell on our walk, and it was connected, and we split that apart, so we shared the shell, and that feels like kind of this really like layered and kind of disintegrating half of a thing. And my PhD has a lot to do with my artistic collaboration with people who are maybe different insofar as they're people who I'm in partnership with when I'm an artist and I'm doing that, but as soon as I'm a PhD researcher using the thing, and I don't know, that feels like a really complicated and interesting relationship and ethics to kind of be including my collaborators in this other thing that I'm doing. And so maybe that's that. And then the rock on the bottom is really beautiful. It's split. It's really gorgeous. But you can't see that because all the other shit's balancing on it. But it's still fun, right? Like, and I think also like it all falls down and then you get it all in hand again. And that's probably okay. It'll look different next time it falls down and I put it back together.
Just thought that would be good. So that's the idea. It's evolving. It's adaptable. It could also be here. I'm not sure. So it's not static. Lots of different versions, but there's some sort of map. There is a map, and I'm interested in investigating different materials, matters, how they relate to each other. Here's a dead woodlouse. Here's some. Yeah. Oh, sorry. There's a dead woodlouse in here. I found it. And there's some. This is a split off, so I can look inside, which I really like. So there's some things that allow me to look on the outside and the inside, and all of this is PhD research. So and it's very exciting, very intriguing.
It was just a comic mask because I'm writing something to do with comedy, and there was a word written under there, but I erased it. So I thought no, nothing written in stone. That it's, I don't know, something to do with mediation anyway. That's it feels like the front of my brain, and stuff's coming through there, but nothing's written in stone in the front of my brain.
I call this piece "I'm a Calamity, Get Me Out of Here," and I chose not to be here because I think I'm probably the only person who's not as excited, not excited at all, who am I kidding, about the whole PhD thing. And there's a little girl in there, and she's tiny, and the PhD can sometimes make you feel like that, as can life and a lot of other things that you need to deal with while you're doing your PhD. So I'm sort of like sheltering myself in this really thin membrane, which might as well not be there at all to protect, because it's not really doing anything, but it's the illusion of having protection from something else and removing yourself from it. And yet, you know, if I were to use those wings, those little feathers, maybe it would help liberate me from myself, but I choose not to because it feels safe. but it's also quite fragile and it's balancing on this thing, and if you know, it's very shaky, and at any minute now that thing's gonna fall and break, and I'm gonna break a limb or break my head or something. So that's how I feel.
So this was a stone we found in the chalk, and we pulled it out, and we were saying that's sort of, well, especially how I feel about the writing process is like pulling teeth out sometimes. So that's, and then there's the picture of us doing that.
Yes. This is my weapon that I've been carrying around all day. I believe it's called a goad, if it was a real life version. Is that right? This one. What was it? The goad. Right, we spelled it probably right. This is very metaphorical in the sense of, if this was me or any one of you, we get polished and worn and softened in the process. So if you feel it, it's very... Cara, feel it, be my demonstrator.
Yeah,
it's been worn down, and we lose part of ourselves here. My staples have come out, but we still have some, but they're coming undone. But that doesn't mean to say that they're going to get tightened and it's going to be something new. And like you've said, it's not written in stone. This one has not even been written on, and we can't work out where it's from. And we've been asking it all day. Where has it been? What does it mean now? Where's it going? This is going on my desk, but I've yet to write on it because I want to remember something that will push me to like not worry about the things that I've lost or that I will lose everything in the process. That I want something very inspirational in it, so I'm going to take it home. So that's this one there. And you already know about the space stones. That between us,
imagination,
we're very interested in creative methods and practice, and so we think that, I said this to you the other day, with a thesis you can only tell one story of a multiple of stories, so it's kind of up to you and also a big weight on your shoulders to decide which story to tell. So this is something that I feel is interesting for that centrepiece there. So
and it was really nice to collaborate.
Yes, and you don't know what you're doing until you do it sometimes, so you can spend a long time researching, mind-numbingly toing and froing with ideas, but yet it's not until you do something like we did, and then we thought, oh, that's the story.
Yeah.
You know?
So I used to live in France, and when I lived in France, I had a friend who was, his boyfriend was doing a thesis, and he said that it's not faire une thèse, it's not to do a thesis, it's to être en thèse, to be in thesis. I think it works better in French. Sorry, that's not my showing off, like, oh, how embarrassing, I speak French, oh guys. But it just always sticks with me, and I definitely feel in thesis now rather than doing one. So that's a little nest that I feel well nested into. Sometimes it's comfy, sometimes it's lonely. And this says, so I found this earlier, and it was black when I found it, and then when I pulled it out of my bag it had dried and changed colour, and I was a bit, oh, there it is, dark on the other side. And so as you know, we're working in extended metaphors well today, I was thinking that it is a bit like that. Some days you look at your thesis and it's a really nice colour that you like, and sometimes you pull it out, it's not changed but it looks a different colour, and you feel the same about yourself. So there's a dip me, dry me thing. Cool. And I went to get the water out of the sea in that. And as I was doing it, I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm going so far to get a little bit of water that's now spilling out. And I think that works as well. You know, you can go a long way in a fruitless effort, but it's okay. There we go.
That was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you everyone for really, you know, taking the activities on board and taking them in your own directions and, you know, sharing, and hopefully you've all taken something or will take quite literally certain things away from the day.
We've got one last thing, which is something where it's sort of it's an activity that's for yourselves and for us, and that's that we asked you to collect a precious pebble throughout the day, or one that, you know, appealed to you. Could you take your pens and just write on the pebble something that you've learnt or that's been useful over these last 2 days, as a bit of feedback for us and also as a bit of kind of consolidation for yourselves? And we can do that while we have the drinks, and then we'll put all the pebbles on one table once they're written on, and they can be anonymous.
Tumblr sometimes to exchange things about